This episode of the Lawyers Hip Hop Happy Hour is sponsored by the law offices of Alfred Guillaume III, a boutique criminal defense firm located in Washington, D.C. The firm specializes in defending federal criminal cases. You can learn more about the firm by visiting our website at guillaumelaw.com. That's GUILLAUME law.com. Attorney David Clunie is an equity partner at the financial services firm Edward Jones. Prior to joining Edward Jones, he worked as the executive director of the Black Economic Alliance. Dave started his career in big law at the New York City law firm Paul Weiss, Rifkand, Wharton and Garrison. During the 2008 presidential campaign, Dave took an unpaid position in the campaign of Senator Barak Obama. He did such a good job during the campaign that he landed a job, paid this time, in President Obama's White House. After serving faithfully in the White House, Dave transitioned to the Treasury Department under Secretary Jack Lew. I have known Dave for over 20 years. We met during our first year at Howard University School of Law, HU. He is one of the hardest working people I've ever met, and I cannot wait for you to hear his story. Sit back, relax, and enjoy. All right, all the way from New York City, Harlem, USA, via the Bronx, via Westchester, via wherever else you live. My friend, my brother, Mr. David Clunie, attorney David Clunie. How you doing, my brother?
Doing well, my brother. Great to be with you.
And I really want to thank you for coming down today. You took a flight just to come talk to me from New York. I truly appreciate it. And I respect, before we even get started, great choice of hat.
Yes, sir.
Great outfit choice, always.
Appreciate
but, you know, let's go Yankees, okay?
Yes, sir.
Now, we were talking a little bit off camera about, you know, how we know each other and reminiscing. And I think we should tell everyone that we went to law school together at Howard Law. HU.
You know.
Graduated in 2005. And we were also talking about the fact that you are of Jamaican descent.
Indeed.
Your parents were both born in Jamaica, right?
My parents were both born in New York City. All four of my grandparents are born in Jamaica.
Okay. So you're second generation American. And you work hard, as is a credit to your culture. You were the guy in law school who stayed up all night, worked, got the best grades, and still partied longer than anybody else. And
work
you're
hard,
still
play
doing
hard,
it.
Brother.
I mean, it's kind of impressive. It's not kind of impressive. It's remarkable. And you're still going. I want to put you on blast, but that was 2005. It was almost 20 years ago. So
don't push us into the 20 years. It was
but yeah,
18, but we're getting there.
And you're still going strong. Currently, you are a partner at Edward Jones, wealth management, equity partner. I made the same mistake last time. Okay, equity partner at Edward Jones, wealth management firm, which is cha-ching. So, ladies, he's still single. So if you, we're recording this on the video just for this purpose. Okay, I'm off the market, you on the market. But yeah, that's wow. I mean, that's all I can say to that. But prior to that, you have had a host of jobs that people only dream of. And I've been there from the beginning. I was there in law school when you was working hard at night and running through the hallways of the law school to now. So I just want to kind of, it's really remarkable for me to watch your growth over these last almost 20 years. Or we've known each other longer than 20 years from when we started, but just since graduating law school, for all people, law students or otherwise, who are want to learn about you and your career path, I'm going to just start with what I know. And if I leave anything out, please tell me. And then we're going to go back and talk about these things, okay?
Sure.
So you graduated from law school and you went to a big firm in New York,
yep.
Paul Weiss.
Correct.
You worked there for a number of years. And then I know you ended up in the White House, but did you have the federal clerkship first?
So, great question. I did a summer associateship at the law firm between our second and third year of law school. I worked at Paul Weiss for 2 years, went to clerk for a federal district court judge for a year after
in Philadelphia.
2 years at the firm in Philadelphia, in Eastern District, United States District Court for the Eastern District of Pennsylvania. I went from there to work on the Obama campaign in Iowa as deputy director of voter protection. and then went back to the law firm for a little less than 2 years before going to the White House.
Right. So you were in the White House in the Obama years.
Yes.
And as I recall, you kind of rose through the ranks pretty quickly. You started, what was your first job in the White House?
So first job in the White House was actually unpaid.
I remember that.
As what's called an associate. There was the associate program where you go basically try out for a job for up to 6 months. And if you get picked up, then you get placed either in the White House or elsewhere in the administration. It took me about 3 months, and I got picked up and stayed in the office I was working in. So I was a vetting attorney in the White House counsel's office, where our client was the presidential personnel office, and we were vetting potential nominees for appointment, everything from cabinet secretaries down to boards and commissions. And that was my first job. You kind of get tapped with doing a lot of other things if you're a lawyer in the White House.
So wait a minute. Let me just get this straight. You were making good money at your law firm.
Yes, as my parents reminded me when I left that job to go volunteer, as they said, in the White House.
And you left that job to make nothing.
Zero money, yes.
At the
and
White
worked
House.
Many hours for zero money. Yes.
Many hours. And you moved to D.C., a place that's not cheap to live.
No, it is not.
And you were, and not, so it normally takes folks 6 months. You got your promotion in 3 months. So you basically missed like 2 checks.
No, it was more than 2 checks. It was September through December. So was that September, October, November? It was more like 4 months. And in the time that I was doing that, I had saved up money from my law firm, but I also was living with one of our classmates from law school, Sam Mannion, his brother.
Shout out Sam Mannion.
Shout out to Sam, Big Sam.
Big Sam, Toucan Sam.
Sam Scroller.
He'll be here at some point soon.
Indeed, freestyling all over your podcast.
And yo, before you continue, just want to shout out your fraternity, Alpha Phi Alpha.
Yes, sir.
Sam is your fraternity brother.
Indeed.
And he also went to law school with us.
Yes, sir.
But continue.
But he was also my roommate in the infamous 7541 Alaska Avenue, which
all right, let's go. Do we really want to talk about that?
Yes, sir. That was the capital of the work hard, the play hard part of the work hard, play hard during our last, let's call it, year and a half of law school. Anyway, I was paying $500 a month to live in a house in Maryland in Hyattsville with Sam's brother and like 6 other people. And it was basically a Howard pharmacy school, like group house that I was living in to save money while I was working these crazy hours at the White House. So it was like, not only was I not
your
getting
fancy
paid,
Manhattan law firm.
yes, where I was making more money than
God.
I had,
Yes.
than I had ever made and than my family ever made. And it was a great blessing. But I remember my family being like, well, you going to go leave this great job to go not get paid? But I saw the vision and I just really wanted to be a part of the movement. And,
right. You really did. I mean, we had President Obama was the first Black president, obviously. And you left your job, your extremely high paying job. I can't emphasize that enough. Because at the time I didn't have one. I was like, wait a minute, what? Could I sub for you? To follow this movement, as you call it. And it was quite a movement.
Indeed.
So not only do you follow it, you end up being a part of it, which is amazing. So you're in the White House, you get the promotion. What's next?
So, and let me say, I've been the beneficiary of good timing and great opportunities throughout my career. I've always worked hard, as you said, but I've also been in the right place at the right time in a number of ways. So after my time at the White House, after getting picked up and becoming a vetting attorney, was there for about another year and a half, and then went to the Treasury Department, where I was an Obama appointee in the front office, working first with Secretary Tim Geithner for about his last year, and then with Secretary Jack Lew for the next 2.5 years before I left the administration.
And let me just, I mean, you're a humble guy, but these are like some big names. Like these are the type of people you hear about in the news, in financial circles. And you are from, we didn't really get into that because we jumped right into your career. You're not from a wealthy family.
No.
Those are the type of people that end up in these positions because they can afford to. They can, and no fault of their own, they have parents who support them and they can go and be a part of something and not get paid money, but have great access to power. So you come from New York. You were born in the Bronx, correct?
Born in Yonkers, just north of the Bronx, Westchester County.
And you split your time as a child between the Bronx and Westchester County, is that right?
I was in Westchester longer than, I moved to the Bronx toward the end of high school, but we moved to my grandmother's house in the Bronx after she passed away when I was in high school.
And we were talking off camera about, the images of the Bronx at that time. Mm-hmm. Ronald Reagan famously said he's never going to go there, something to that effect. And this of course, it may not have been as bad where you grew up, but it was still the late 80s, early 90s, and it was not anything like it is now, I would imagine.
Right.
And you go to high school, you go to college. Where'd you go to school? Where'd you go to college?
Went to college at the State University of New York at Albany.
So you did not go to Harvard, Yale, Stanford.
Okay, don't talk about my school like that. Hold on.
No, but you know what I'm saying. Neither did I.
No, I know what you're talking about. Yes.
Neither did I.
Not one of what people would call the feeder schools, too.
Right, exactly. That's the thing, is that people need to understand that no matter where you go to school, in my opinion, if you're determined enough and work hard enough, even though it might take you longer to get there, you can still get where you need to go.
That's right.
And people said about our law school that it's not a quote unquote top law school, but I wouldn't want to have anywhere else.
Never.
To this day, it's the best decision I ever made, and I think you probably would feel the same.
Absolutely agree. And let me talk a little bit about both. My undergrad experience at the State University of New York at Albany was the perfect thing for me at the time. My brother had gone there 4 years earlier. It was the right financial move for me to make, but I also learned so much about myself, about life, and joined the fraternity Alpha Phi Alpha at the time, and just really grew as a person and as a man. And they went right to Howard University, where you're absolutely right. I remember when we were choosing law schools, all anybody cared about was where the school fell on the U.S. News and World Report ranking. And it was like, if you weren't in the top 10 or 20, they didn't want to hear about it. And we were, I think Howard was at the time, it may still be a technically third tier school, but you look at the placement of graduates, the network of people, what even, the brothers from our class, or the people from our class, what they have done. I'm biased. We are an exceptional class. 05. But I think we may still be the largest class to ever graduate from the law school. But it is the case that people coming out of Howard have a special experience, and we really crush the game, whatever we go into, whether it's
slaughtered the game, man. What are you? 05 was that year.
Man, we were very fortunate, for real, to get there at the same time, find each other, and push each other personally and professionally. And I love, the family and community that we have among each other.
Disclaimer to the podcast listeners: every guest is from Howard. That's where they all come from. All right,
that's a podcast I want to listen to.
Not everyone, but 99%. Right, man. And I have small children, and I have dreams that one of my kids will follow my footsteps, and I wouldn't want them to go anywhere. Of course, they can make their own decisions, whatever. But Howard Law is where you need to be. I mean, for a variety of reasons, but yes, I appreciate the love that you give, and of course that we all have for our alma mater.
Yes, sir.
And 18 years later, we're still all very close. I mean, you flew in from New York to DC just to talk to me today. And that's brotherhood. That's love. That's Howard, man. So.
You have done the same for me. You would do the same for me. You definitely packed all your stuff in a car to come up to New York and DJ a party for my 30th that
it never happened.
Didn't quite go the way we had planned, but we had a good time nonetheless.
It's all good. So let's get back to the White House. You're there. You've got this new position. And you transitioned to the Treasury Department shortly after, is that right? How long afterwards were you in the Treasury Department?
I started at the White House in September of 2010, and I went to Treasury at the end of January, call it February 2012. So it was under 2 years. It was a little more than a year and a half.
Right. You're at the Treasury Department for how many years?
4.5 years.
Wow, was that long?
It was about 4 years, a little under 4 years. It was 20. Yeah, it was a little less than 4 years. Yeah.
And in that position, you are meeting, I'm imagining, all kinds of powerful people. Mm-hmm. Want to name drop anybody right now? So
interestingly, it was both people who were already powerful, like, bank CEOs, other financial regulators, people who were, important in the financial world. But then it's one of the things I've been most impressed with is the people I worked with and where they've gone to now. Right. Like my homegirl, Adrienne Harris, who is the first Black woman to be the superintendent of the New York State Department of Financial Services. My boy Wally Adeyemo, we shared an office with each other, shared a door to our offices. He actually stole the bigger office that was supposed to be mine.
Wally, what's going on, man?
And he is now the Deputy Secretary of the Treasury Department, the highest ranking Black person to ever, be at the Treasury Department. And he's, a year younger than me. Wow. A lot of folks I got to work with there have gone on to do phenomenal things. And I'm extremely proud of them. And but I also learned so much from the really, really sharp people. And I remember being very intimidated walking in that building for the first couple of days and weeks, both because I didn't have, a deep financial background like some of these folks did, but also, because it was just, we were operating at such a high level and everything we were doing was so high stakes. But I took, pressure makes diamonds, and a lot of phenomenal policies and good things for our economy came out of that time that we were there.
When you say that the pressure was high, can you give a little more detail? And the stakes were high. Like, what do you specifically remember about that time and the economy and the decisions that you had to make or be a part of?
For anyone who hasn't heard of the financial crisis of 2008,
that was where it was going.
The economy was falling off a cliff at the beginning of the Obama administration, and there were, unprecedented actions like pumping $700 million into, $700 billion into the economy to try for stimulus and to basically stop the bleeding and figure out how to stabilize things. And it just was a completely different world than any of us had ever been in, and nobody knew what the outcome was going to be. And I do remember at the beginning of the Obama administration, really, through a lot of the first term, Tim Geithner and a lot of the people making these decisions were getting a ton of criticism, and people were saying they don't get it, they don't know what they're doing, they're out here, taking shots that aren't going to hit. And a lot of the policies that were implemented in 2009, 2010, 2011, and throughout the Obama administration, really, you didn't start to see the real effect of them until afterward. And even things like the Affordable Care Act, or Obamacare, it was upheld by the Supreme Court as a tax. So, the Treasury Department is in charge of the IRS and is in charge of tax policy. We had to implement, alongside HHS and the Department of Labor, this really sophisticated, really complicated law that was completely unprecedented, and 10 years later is much more popular than it was at the time. But you had Congress fighting back against it. You had, the American public that was skeptical about it, and we had to just kind of keep our head down and keep going forward and implementing these changes that we knew were going to pay dividends in the long term. But a lot of them were not that popular at the time. So it was,
I remember,
extremely, the pressure was extremely high.
So how does a guy from the Bronx, without the financial backing of a family, how do you get to the level of I'm assuming, correct me if I'm wrong, you weren't exposed to this kind of stuff when you were younger, or you weren't primed for it?
Well, let me first say about my family. What I did learn, my parents we were middle class. We were not, poor. My mother was a school teacher that went back to school while raising us to become an administrator and ultimately a principal in the New York City Department of Ed and the Bronx District 10 her whole career.
Shout out to Miss Rose.
She is the best, the greatest. And my father, who was a banker, but a mid-level banker at Chase Manhattan Bank.
I don't think I ever knew that.
He used to oversee loans for all of Westchester and the Bronx. And, having exposure to banking was very much at the retail level. And my brother and I were both tellers.
Wow, I didn't know that either. I know you a long time. I had no idea.
Yes, sir. Upper East Side of Manhattan. And, it was a cool experience, but it was also at the, at the very lowest level. I never knew anything about banking policy, economic policy, any of that. And what I did take away from my family and how that applies to, getting to where I got was hard work and, work ethic, keeping your head down, and also the understanding that as a Black man, I had to be twice as good to get half as far as my counterparts. So that was something I took throughout my entire, educational career, my sports career, anything I did. The grind was whatever got me through. I've never been the smartest guy in the room, but I just work extremely hard and leave it all on the field. So that's, my family did prepare me in that way, even though I didn't have the substantive experience of having been exposed to this type of work.
So you had the fire in your belly, and I think you probably had the feeling that you couldn't fail. Failure is not an option. Mm-hmm. So you had to grind and continue to grind because failure is not an option. Mm-hmm. That's really awesome, man. Well, after you left the Treasury Department, you transitioned to J.P. Morgan Chase. Is that right?
Correct.
And what was your job there? What was your title there?
And I'll give a little bit of my rationale and thinking. One of the reasons I went to the Treasury Department was to get more exposure to economic policy, which is tied to any government policy, any public policy. It has to be paid for, and it was so important. Economic mobility and justice, I think, is really the next step of the civil rights movement, and it is something that Black folks in America have just never attained. So for me, it was an opportunity throughout my career. I felt like I had been a generalist. I had been this lawyer who was doing kind of whatever came across my desk, which was cool. But I wanted to start to gain some expertise. So that was my thinking in going to the Treasury Department. I also saw a direct line through the Treasury Department back home to New York. And that was the case for me. So coming out of Treasury, it was, I was able to have some opportunities to go to financial services and JP Morgan Chase, largest bank in America. And my family has a lot of history with Chase. My father had worked at Chase for years. I was a teller at Chase. My brother was a teller at Chase. And we had Chase accounts since, growing up always. So for me, it was a great opportunity. I came in at a senior level as a managing director, which is also not normal. I was one of two managing directors, Black managing directors in my entire group.
How big is the group?
The group is about 250 people,
So
the corporate responsibility department.
Blacks out of 250 people.
Well, two Black managing directors. There were about 3,000 managing directors out of about 250,000 employees at JP Morgan Chase. When I came in, there were 70, just under 80. There were like 78, 79 Black managing directors out of 3,000. By the time I left, we had doubled that number by a lot of, very specific initiatives.
Wow. It's still a very small number.
It's crazy. The bar is set so low, and people are like, oh, JP Morgan's doing great because they're higher than everybody else in the industry.
5 brothers working in the front.
Exactly. But it was the same thing at the law firm. I remember when I went to Paul Weiss, they had 3 Black partners at the time, and that was way more than any other law firms had, which is still the case now. So, and in any event, went to JP Morgan Chase in a role in government relations, but brought me into the corporate responsibility group. So I was able to learn a lot about external relations at the largest bank in America with a CEO in Jamie Dimon, who is a white man from Queens, New York, who is not afraid to say the word Black and engage in some hard conversations about, how and why the Black community.
Jamie Dimon.
Indeed, who is the longest serving, bank CEO. He's the only one who was there during the financial crisis, who is still there now. And he and his leadership team were invested in disaggregating data and breaking down why Black folks were not having the same outcomes as even other minorities, women, and others, and making very specific. What's that?
I said I know one reason. Slavery.
I mean, that's
exactly. My Kenya Barris impersonation. Shout out to Kenya Barris.
Exactly. But it's real. And unfortunately, a lot of executives, especially folks outside of the Black community, are not comfortable or willing to have that conversation, especially in a public forum. So
right. It's a tough conversation to have. Especially for someone who's not Black and who's quote unquote wants to do the right thing, but doesn't know how to do it and doesn't want to offend people by saying things the wrong way and that sort of stuff.
And people have before. There's Charlie Scharf, CEO of Wells Fargo, who's a former Chase executive, really stepped in it by saying to a group of Black people at Wells Fargo, and this got out publicly, that one of the reasons you couldn't have more senior, managing directors and Black folks is because there's just not enough in the pool. Like there's not enough of a pool of talent among Black folks. And he had to clean that statement up. He's like, well, what I meant was, it's like the pipeline is not there because, of the education system and but it was, that kind of thing happens. And that makes a lot of people say, like, I don't want to touch it.
Exactly. Yeah. That's, I'm not going to touch that comment too much. We can talk about hours about that. But you were at JP Morgan Chase for how many years?
4.5 years.
And then you transitioned to the Black Economic Alliance.
Correct.
And you were a big shot in the Black world now.
And
all the brothers.
As some might say, I'm not going to say it, the HNIC.
Right. The head honcho. So what did you do for the Black Economic Alliance?
I was the executive director, which is the chief executive officer.
Woo!
And I was a second executive director. It's a relatively new organization. It was started in 2018 by a group of Black CEOs and executives who have done very well in their own right and have been extremely successful in their professional careers. And we're really tired of being the exception instead of the rule. Right. So and a lot of them had been doing work in philanthropy and political action and otherwise, and they were just not seeing the return on their investment. They're putting millions of dollars in some cases into causes, into candidates, into, changing pathways for Black folks to get on. And they were not seeing the return and the material change that they wanted to. So they came together in a meeting in one of these, just titans of industry meetings on the Hamptons in the Hamptons in 2017, and essentially said it was about 90 of them alongside 90, corporate CEOs and executives alongside people like Eric Holder, Cory Booker, Kamala Harris, when she was a senator, Deval Patrick, the second Black governor in the United States, one of only 3 now in our history. And they essentially said, we are some of the most well-resourced Black folks across industries. How can we do this work all of us care about so much and are doing individually? How can we do it better together? And they formed the Black Economic Alliance to basically create infrastructure for Black folks to build wealth through public policy advocacy, political action, and philanthropic programming. And
do you feel that the mission is being accomplished, or is it's been difficult? Is it extremely successful for those people, because it's a new organization that may not know what's going on? Would you say? I know you've left now, so you can speak probably a little more freely. What do you think of the progress the group has made?
So I will say that I still sit on the advisory board, and I still have
Never mind.
No, I still have a ton of love for the organization. And shout to Samantha Tweedy, who succeeded me and became the first CEO of the Black Economic Alliance right after I left. And they are on a phenomenal path. The uniqueness of this group that came together, they are uniquely powerful in their own right, and they have been extremely powerful and effective in a very short period of time. So I would say that the organization is extremely successful. There's so much more work to do, but the way that this organization was able to come on the scene in a short period of time, and I'll give an example. I mentioned Wale Adeyemo before. When I talked to him, weeks before I was leaving the role, he just thanked me and talked about the role that the Black Economic Alliance has played, bringing a different level of sophistication to the discussion about economic policy and the importance of focusing on economic empowerment for Black folks and economic mobility as a necessary component of any economic growth strategy for the entire U.S. economy. And there are statistics out there about, if you were to close the Black-white wealth gap, you could add $5 trillion to U.S. GDP over 5 years, and how that's
saying something.
It's crazy, and how we've lost since 1990 over $50 trillion of GDP growth as a result of the entire economy has lost that growth as a result of racial inequality. So you're thinking about unrealized potential. That's what this organization is about. And it's not only for Black folks, it is for, the benefit of the entire economy, but it's really unapologetically focusing on Black folks. And as you said, we are uniquely situated because of slavery, because of generations and a legacy of laws that have kept us out of opportunity in every American institution, educational, financial, anywhere you look, there are laws and things on the books that have housing kept us out of building wealth. So the organization has done a great job of raising the specter of the importance of this work, but also being embedded in the access that they have to leaders in the private sector, in the public sector, and nonprofit sector alike has been instrumental to them being able to make real impact in a short period of time.
Well, that's quite an endorsement. And, shout out to the Black Economic Alliance and the work that they're doing and continue to do. But I want to ask you, transitioning a little bit to kids, law students, or people who are younger who want to get into your line of work. You've had it seems like a diverse background. What, besides hard work, what would you recommend someone who's in law school or even in college to get to where you're at? What do you think is the best thing that they could do for themselves to get to your position?
So I would say one of the biggest differentiators for me has been relationships and exposure. And, talking about how you get to where we all started and how we get to, where we're trying to go, certain just decisions were integral to putting me on different paths. Going to Howard Law was a huge one of them. Joining Alpha Phi Alpha was another one. Going to work in the Obama administration was another. Even going to Paul Weiss for me, because I was able to get connected to a mentor there, a number of mentors, but one in particular I'll shout out, Jay Johnson, who was at the time, the first Black partner at Paul Weiss. He'd gone to Morehouse undergrad, gone to Columbia for law school, grew up at the law firm there, had been an assistant U.S. attorney in the Southern District of New York, and then became a Clinton appointee as general counsel of the Air Force, then became an Obama appointee. He worked at the law firm all this time in between, became an Obama appointee first as general counsel of the Pentagon of the Department of Defense, and then became Homeland Security Secretary. And, meeting him at the point in his career where he was just the first Black partner at this law firm that I was working at, and he took an interest in me because I'm coming out of an HBCU, he came out of an HBCU, I never could have imagined how that relationship would have blossomed.
Right.
There's so many examples of relationships like that throughout my career, and I enjoy playing that role for other people now. Where
Right, that was my next question.
It's so important.
So
man.
mentorship is important.
It is crucial especially for Black folks, especially for Black men. And it's been such a part of all of our careers. And I think that's one of the best things about Howard is we all look out for each other. And it's not only other people who went to Howard, or you look out for other Black folks. We learned from Charles Hamilton Houston that a lawyer is either a social engineer or a parasite on society.
Yes, sir.
So we have the responsibility to lift others as we climb. And that's been, such a huge game changer in my career. And other people often think like, well, I'm not good at networking, or I don't have these connects. I didn't have these connects. My parents weren't politically connected. Like we didn't grow up in these worlds. You put yourself in positions to be able to get exposed, and you seize opportunities when you're there. That's the other thing I think people need to understand. Mentorship is a two-way street. And when you are somebody's mentee, you have to provide value to them as well. You can't just take and ask. You need to, send them an article that is, helpful to what they're working on.
That's really amazing. I never thought about it like that, but yeah.
It's real, but think about it. We all have the people who you've mentored, who you like mentoring because you see, that they're about their business. And honestly, it can be as easy as like showing up when you say you're going to show up, following up with people, being proactive and being on time and respecting their time. When somebody, you feel like you're doing them a favor and you also don't believe in their future, that they're going to do the work, to be successful, it's a lot harder to invest in somebody. So I say to anybody who is looking for, mentorship, the best thing you can do is be on your game, be on time, be proactive, take the responsibility to cultivate that relationship, but also think about how you can provide value to the person who is giving of their time, their knowledge, their relationships, and all that to you as well.
That is great advice. And that is something that I had not previously thought about, but I'm going to take that and I'm probably going to steal it. Well, I mean, this is the Lawyers Hip Hop Happy Hour.
Yes, sir. Let's get into it.
So
that's what I'm here for.
Exactly. Notice how the voice just changed and everything is just different. Thank you for listening to this episode of the Lawyers Hip Hop Happy Hour. Please subscribe to this podcast. It's available everywhere, including Apple, Spotify, and Amazon. New episodes are released on the 12th of each month. And if you'd like to see the video version of any interview, they can be found on my YouTube page at the Lawyers Hip Hop Happy Hour. Thank you for your support, and I'll catch you on the B-side.